All right. Welcome everyone to day 2 of our technology lab. I'm Ted Hopton, coming to you from Chicago, and I'm joined by my co-host, Nicole Carter, coming to you from Edinburgh, Scotland. It's great to see so many of you back to continue our journey exploring the digital employee experience, hereafter to be referred to as DEX because it's just too many words to say every time. This technology lab is brought to you by the DWG Technology and Research Institute with the help of our sponsors Beezy and Workgrid. DWG, or the Digital Workplace Group, offers consulting and benchmarking services as well as an exclusive membership organization to help organizations around the world maximize the value of their digital workplaces. So DWG Institute Technology Labs bring together digital workplace practitioners and technology providers to share with and learn from each other. We encourage you to participate actively today. So please ask questions in the chat, have back channel discussions there, get to know and learn from each other in the peer-to-peer huddles. And near the end, please do share what's on your mind with the rest of us. And afterward, we'll share all of your responses with each other. So we mentioned yesterday the three-part story arc in every technology lab: identify, illuminate, and innovate. Today, we'll begin with an illuminate session, and then we'll turn to innovate sessions to provide insight on new thinking and solutions. So our agenda for today is quite full, and we'll be posting a link to it in the chat if you'd like to review it. Please note that the technology labs are experimental, so we really are looking for your feedback. We're trying out new things. We want to know what you think worked well, what didn't work, and we'd love to hear your ideas for improvements. So let's get started. Nicole, would you like to recap our topic for this lab so we can get everybody on the same level?
Certainly, Ted. Yes, the focus of this lab is the digital employee experience, or DEX. We saw yesterday how this is really a subset, but an important one, of all the elements of an employee's working life. And we've been exploring the complexity of the digital employee experience and asking our sponsored technology providers and the practitioners we've had join us to share their differing perspectives to help inform your thinking and action in your own workplace. Obviously, we're all looking at work from the perspective of adjustments due to COVID-19. Some organisations are in the workplace, others are working from home, and many of us are in a hybrid of the two, or in transition, hence the title of our session. With that, Ted, let's get started today by taking a thoughtful look back at day 1.
Let's do. So let me real quick paste in a couple of links for you in the chat in case you haven't had a chance to look at them. But we reviewed all the input that everybody shared with us yesterday, both in the Voice of the Practitioner session where we talked about, we asked you 3 questions, and then we asked you near the end to share your reflections. So we've looked at that input, we've given it some thought, we've asked our technology partners, Workgrid and Beezy, to also review what was submitted and to think of in what ways they would like to respond to that. And we're bringing in another practitioner perspective for this discussion as well to share her perspective. So Keeley Sorokti has been the Director of Knowledge Sharing at the Ounce of Prevention Fund since 2018, where she's currently leading a digital workplace transformation project to reimagine the way that employees and external stakeholders connect, communicate, and collaborate. She's also launched and managed internal and external communities online for 2 software companies and has a master's in learning and organizational change from Northwestern University. So let's dive right in. And Nicole, let's just start with you to get us going, and then we'll call on all the other folks and hear what their points of view are.
Okay, yeah, sure. So what struck me yesterday was how little COVID-19 surfaced in the chat or the presentations yesterday. So it strikes me that this evolution was sort of happening anyway, and we sort of know that, but I think the current situation just picked up the pace and sped everybody up. I think it does mean now that organisations will have to evaluate where they are and ensure that they've not left anyone behind, because the speed of this change over the last few months has been really fast, certainly for some organisations which were maybe sort of planning this in the future or hadn't even thought about it. So I think that the whole sort of proliferation of digital tools and the things that have been thrown at people over the last few months probably need to be looked at now and reflected on and certainly tweaked and changed. Also, people in the feedback that we got through the forms that people filled in yesterday were asking how to manage this in their organisation. So they're looking at, how they can manage the whole employee experience and specifically the digital employee experience, and outside of the usual, HR, IT, comms sort of silos that people are used to. So, and I think that through our research in DWG and sort of my experience consulting, we find that more and more organizations are employing a chief experience officer or a manager even, who sits outside of these roles and oversees the whole thing. So that's their only role, and they're basically the go-between and the overseer, and they make sure that all the projects that people are working to in those different silos all have that same sort of focus really on improving the employee experience and allowing the people to do their jobs. So we're sort of seeing that more and more, and we saw that yesterday in Jay's session as well, how he'd sort of elevated that position in his organization as a good case study. Keeley, what stood out for you?
Thanks, Nicole. That's actually a great tee up, because I also have been reflecting a lot about what Jay Graff shared yesterday. And I don't think he's with us today, so he won't know I'm talking about. But what Kevin kicked us off yesterday, kind of with the history of various periods of work, and said we're moving into this age of employee experience. And then Steve, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, Binghall.
Yep.
In the overtime session, he kind of summed up his top takeaways, and a couple of them were just about exactly what Kevin said, right? We're in this age of employee experience, and the digital workplace plays a significant role. COVID's turned up the dial, but also he's talked about cross-functional structures are needed in order to drive DEX. And as I thought about yesterday, I really was thinking about the new potential org structures. And it's good to hear, Nicole, that some organizations are creating these umbrella DEX roles. I am not at a large organization, or I have not been in any organizations where that's true. So it's good to know that's happening. I think my reflection questions are really around, like, if this is the age of employee experience and the digital workplace plays a significant role, who will be leading the employee experience strategy? Because it crosses over so many functions, and it seems like some new roles are required. And also, kind of, what are the implications of not doing that, right? What are the implications of having one business function, whether it's HR or internal comms or whoever else might own that employee experience? And I specifically, Jay's story really struck me because he talked about how there's a term called job crafting, and he really crafted a new role for himself and told the story of how he did that. And I think what struck me is that there's a lot of parallels to many of us. I know I recognized a lot of people, and a lot of you who are on here are online community or enterprise social network, social intranet professionals. And we have for many years had to kind of explain what we do, and people don't really understand our roles. And it sounds like we might be in a similar situation now, where we really need to get crisp about talking about the value of an employee experience role, where it might sit, bringing those stories alive. And I just felt like those of us that have been doing this kind of work for many years actually have a lot of the skill sets that I think are needed for these employee experience roles. And it might be another challenge, right? Online community professionals kind of started coming about 10 years ago. And it sounds like we might be moving into a new era where we need to continue to help organizations understand the roles they might need that they don't have, and what those org structures are. And I looked at some of the responses from many of you who are on today about what you wanted to learn, what you're struggling with, and a lot of it were those kinds of comments. So Jillian said she's trying to better figure out how DEX fits into fits in organizationally, function-wise. How is it managed? Howard Chang, I think it was Howard. Trying to remember here. Yeah, Howard Chang also really asked a lot of those same questions. What's the organizational structure? So I think that's a really interesting potential future topic for us to dig deeper into. I think the technology is always going to be a challenge. It's not all going to integrate. It's not going to be perfect. So I think we need these roles in order to help organizations and employees make sense of all of it.
It is. I mean, there's a lot of good points you made there, Keeley, but it's definitely not just the technology, right? There's a whole the bigger part of it in many ways is the management of it, the processes, the structure. I was struck by that too in the responses. Certainly people are thinking about that, and not surprisingly. Brett, I think you and I had a chance to chat a little bit, and we were talking about how do you get there? Nicole mentioned there's some organizations that have a chief employee experience officer, but I'm sure many of us, are thinking like, how in the world would I get to that? How would I possibly get approval for such a role? How do you get from where I am now, which is nobody even thinks about DEX, to that kind of situation? And I thought you had some insights. What were your thoughts as you reflected on what people shared?
Yeah, I personally haven't gone through that journey, and sort of looking at in our realm, we've progressed to that level of chief employee experience officer, trying to bring product management across and get a little more horizontal in the organization. But it was a little grassroots, and I think if you don't overthink it, you've got to build some trust and camaraderie. You look at even the basics of rolling out a more holistic DEX between IT, HR, and comms. Just those three alone can drive a lot of the stickiness that you need to make the message right, improve the value. So I think some of it comes with having the plan and showing the value and having it to senior leadership, and then it'll grow over time. I think that's what we saw from a grassroots perspective was moving into that next era of what digital employee experience is, beyond communications and just things that were typical on the internet, trying to bring that to be a more broad-based piece. It did start sort of grassroots, and then you've got to influence and bring people along. So it's almost no different, I think, as structurally changing anything within an organization. It takes time, but you have to start. Don't start big. Start small and get value fast.
So you're talking about your experience at Liberty Mutual,
right?
Yeah, Maximo, what were some of the things that you noted in the in the responses from people? What stood out for you?
Well, a few things. There was one thing that at some point people were chatting about. Somebody came up with this idea of a landing page for Teams. And then some people reacted saying that, hey, this cannot exist. Microsoft will never want that, and you cannot do that. And actually, I didn't have the time to chime in, but it's kind of possible today. It's something that we are doing in the product. I don't want to go too much into the details now, but if you want, I can share a little bit how we do that, how really the user experience is that you can today bring parts of the intranet to the Teams experience, and you can kind of control this, where you position this entry point. So yeah, I think there is some misconception about how Teams is working. I think part of this comes from SharePoint and the old way of doing things. I think that Microsoft with Teams have a quite different approach, very open approach. And I think that they are thinking about Teams almost like a new browser for the office and for the workplace. And that gives us products like Beezy that are very specialized in Office 365 and SharePoint and the platform, to really create this kind of digital employee experience landing page in Teams without competing at all with the core functionality of Teams, but really bringing this kind of missing part that is more the news, the internet content, policies, guidelines, and then all these integrations with third parties that I will cover on my session.
Thank you. As I was looking at it and thinking about it, one of the things that stood out for me when the responses was, and it's some of the discussions we had yesterday during the program, was around the whole product management kind of mindset. And I've spent a little time in product management, and it's really I think a useful way to approach the whole digital employee experience. Is think of yourself as creating a product for the employee, as if you were doing it for an external customer. And that mindset of really working on developing the personas, the whole journey, the experience journey, what does the employee go through, and then managing the development of it. And to go back to Brett's point, rather than some big bang project that's going to solve everything, start small, pick something to focus on, improve that bit of the business, improve that bit of the experience, and begin to prove the value of what you're doing to get the attention. I think that's one of the things that stood out for me. I also felt like there was a theme that emerged in the responses around how do you support the employees? How do you support the users? They've got all these challenges. So we can have at the one level a high level vision of where we're trying to go. And then there's the right now, the pain points, and how do we help users get through that and get better at that? I don't know if any of you guys want to comment on that and your thoughts about what can we do to help people maybe take those incremental steps to lessen some of the pain, to support them as they're working through the reality of now before we can get to an improved future. You're on mute, Nicole.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, just on the back of that, you know, a lot of it's about training. Do we need to train employees? And we had a little bit of a chat about that yesterday, but it'll be interesting to hear from like Brett and Maximo what you think about that as well, about training on products, and is that something that people should be factoring in, or is it the case of having a demo and letting people go?
I think there was the topic yesterday around this idea of personas, this idea of finding an employee journey. Is this specific employee in this specific division that is try to doing this or achieve this during his work. That is a concept that works very well. I will be covering part of this during my presentation. Instead of creating one integration with one tool, in Beezy, we are thinking about a framework to allow our customers to cater for all these very diverse personas and employee journeys that they will have. So it's kind of like a system where it's you, the customer, deciding which scenarios you're going to cover. And then you need to work with these people, understand the flow, understand how they think about things, and configure something that will serve their own flow. I think the concept of personas, building these core personas and building these core employee journeys, it's a very valuable tool.
I can echo that on the journey side. Interesting too, because that's pretty right. You know, it's very diverse across the enterprise. You know, and it's not just about Office 365 or Microsoft products, right? It extends across line of business applications that really, and everything that these employees are interacting with that provide them with value. But when you look at some of those things, when you talk about, you know, it's easy, even us as employees, because we all are employees. You know, we have our own views, and there's a lot of those things that do hit everybody, regardless of how individualized personas are. So even simple things as being able to take time off easy or see your pay slip, right? That touches everybody. And I think the importance there, it goes back to a little bit, you know, I said earlier, and Ted reiterated around starting easy and starting with those high value, high impact pieces. And not discounting the fact that, you know, listening to your employees and providing that feedback channel is really what tends to drive some of that future continuous growth and product model, right? Because then you're providing incremental delighters over time. And we've seen this in various instances of things that employees care about that we never would have known, right? So, you know, the ability, and this is kind of our approach, you know, as we designed our platform, was to have it to be open and extensible, you know, with software development kits and various other self-service tools, because oftentimes the people on the front line are going to know much better even than the people at the product level who are up here. So empowering them to actually, you know, receive feedback, make decisions and prioritize on that, more pointed, actually brings it more of a holistic experience to the employee.
Yeah, so we're looking again at that like experience layer that we were talking about yesterday being, you know, it's maybe aspirational, but it's certainly valid to always be striving towards that, really.
Yeah, I honestly don't think it's as aspirational as everybody seems to think. You know, it seems that way, but the technology supports it today. And you'd probably be surprised at how fast you can obtain value and start incrementally building out what would be, you know, that aggregation layer.
Okay.
I think there's one other sort of point I wanted to raise. that's around the, perhaps the perception. I confess to it, I had it, and then in some of the discussions I've had with people about this topic, I think I've grown in my appreciation of how I needed to change my perspective. And I think I had the sense when I was running, these kinds of internal resources for employees that I was well connected with what the people, what people needed. I was listening to them, I was hearing from them. And I think it was in the conversation I had with Neil Morgan, who we heard from yesterday, who kind of pushed back on me and said, you've got to make sure you get out and talk to the people who aren't using the system. It's not enough just to be really listening closely to the people who are using it. And I was listening, I felt like I've got this covered. I'm really paying attention to what people are telling me. But he was encouraging me, go out and find the people who don't use it and find out why and find out what their needs are. So I would challenge everybody to think that way as well. Push yourself to, really when you're thinking about the employee experience, don't assume just because you're an employee or you talk to lots of employees, you actually have it really figured out. You've got to always be listening, always be talking to more people. So any thoughts around that?
Well, I was going to say one of the questions that came in was linked to that really. So that was, or someone wrote in the survey really. So they were asking how priorities have shifted and what's really the must when people are thinking about the digital employee experience. So I don't know if Max has got anything to say about that really.
Yes, it's interesting because I get this question often, and I think I got it in a previous event that we did together, and I kind of reflected afterwards the event, and I didn't answer at that moment and didn't realize that we were making changes in our product because of all these current crises, but we were doing it, and I think it's interesting. One thing that happened to us is that we have a product that is very social oriented. So the concept of communities, the concept of employee generated content, the concept of kind of organic interaction between the employees is very important. But we realized in this period that it was also suddenly very, very important to control the flow, control the information, make sure that the official channels for what was going on were as prominent as the social component. And we are launching now a big major version of the product at the end of the month that it's quite focused on this idea. We have a new component called the hero that is kind of much more control. In a way, it can be left very open to the social side of Beezy, but we are really finding a better balance between the official communication, the official channel, and then the kind of grassroots and community content. And I still remember also it was in one of your events. I don't remember what company it was, but they were mentioning that during the worst part of the crisis, at least, they were shutting down their Yammer network. It was too much noise. They wanted to really, really control the message and what was going on and the official information. And they decided to shut down the let's call it the social network part of their digital workplace. At the beginning, when I heard that, I found it a bit radical, but then I kept thinking about this, and it's quite connected to things that we now do in the product that only 6 months ago were kind of, it felt like going backwards, you know what I mean? So it's interesting.
We're just about at time for this, but Keeley, can we call on you to just sort of share any, you've been listening in on these, any other final thoughts you have, and then we'll wrap up this discussion.
In me on the spot. I don't know if I have any other final, I just would, I agree with everything that people are saying. I think I'm trying to process what Maximo just shared about shutting down Yammer.
Well,
that's really interesting.
I mean, I would say from you're someone that's on the coal face, really. You're at the front end. You're doing this rather than the people that are producing the technology. And it's not as, it's just looking at all the products available to you and yeah, exactly, shutting down Yammer, making all these decisions, while you're actually trying to get the job done as well from a comms or knowledge management or point of view.
Yeah, I mean, I think what strikes me, I didn't talk about technology initially, but what strikes me is this this need. I've been saying it for a long time. Ted and I have had many conversations about this need for umbrella systems that sit on top of all of these. So I think Workgrid, I don't know a lot about Workgrid, but it seems that Workgrid starts to get at that. I think that's really needed. Some light umbrella system to bring things together. Doesn't necessarily, I don't know what that would look like, but it just continues to strike me in all of these conversations that something like that is needed.
Okay. Okay, well, thanks everybody for these